All right, I would like to call to order the regular council meeting for Monday, September 10th, 2018. Roll call, please. Mr. Lau.
Mrs. Merrill?
Present.
Mr. Steigel? Present. Mr. Curry? Here. Mr. Bergquist?
Here.
Mr. Lewis? Here. Mr. Ball?
Present.
Mr. Kozer?
Here.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting held on August 27th, 2018.
So moved. Second.
Any alterations, changes, deletions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. 720. Next item is special reports, and there apparently is none. So we will move on to audience comments. This is a period of time during the regular council meeting when someone from the audience can talk about a non-agenda item. That would be an item that's not on tonight's agenda, and we kind of limit that to about 5 minutes or so. Anyone want to come up? Wow.
Yeah.
Hello, my name's John McCarthy, and I live on Greenbrier Drive, directly across from the community. 105 Greenbrier Drive, directly across the community options rental property at 106 Greenbrier Drive. There has been drama with police, fire, and ambulance vehicles, but it has calmed down. There are 4 to 8 vehicles over there most days, and if they all park in the driveway, I would appreciate their consideration. But often there are 2 cars parked on the grass next to the street, which ruins the views out of my front windows. I've also seen the Brookwood Community Options folks parking on Greenbrier Drive. Thank you for putting the long overdue no overnight parking sign on our street.
You're welcome.
We have another group home scheduled to open, so I expect the police to ticket violators who park overnight, as the street is narrow and emergency vehicles need access to all houses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Joanne Moore, and I live at 114 Greenbrier Drive. As you all know, Greenbrier has the community options home at 106 Greenbrier Drive. We had trouble with that group home, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, and the woman that was the troublemaker there was moved to 111 Brookwood Road, which is about 600 feet from Greenbrier Drive. Now we come to find out that 118 Greenbrier Drive is going to be rented to a Mr. Scott Taylor, and he is going to run a home for mentally challenged people. So now, essentially, we have 2 group homes on a street that has 12 houses on it, and another group home 600 feet from our street, and they're telling me there's nothing that can be done to stop this in our neighborhood. And in addition to that, the landlord that rents these 2 homes also owns another home on the other side of the street, and it's rumored that that particular renter is going to be moving. So we have the possibility that we could be looking at another group home. And it just seems like the most absurd thing to me. Do we not have any rights in all of this?
Well, I think that we're very sympathetic to your...
I know it. I know it.
We are going to try to look into what options that we have available. But as limited as they appear right now, we'll try to see if there's some way, somehow, we can come.
I mean, is there anything you can tell us we can do on our own? I mean, when this was going on with the community options home at 106, I mean, I called my state legislatures, federal government and stuff like that. But, it just seems like anymore our government is so twisted in the protection of the least among us that none of us have any rights of our own. What right do I have in my neighborhood that I have worked hard my whole life to even be able to afford? And the other thing about our street is it's really not a very good street to accommodate any additional traffic. Our street at the widest point is 18 feet wide. We have no curbs on our street. When they wanted to connect our street to the Spring Meadow plan and have that be a cut through, it was said that it would cost $68,000 to bring our street, Greenbrier, up to code. Mike Silvestri at the time said, it's just going to be a cut-through street. I'd rather have the money go into Brookwood. Well, okay. But now, what are we looking at? If people, we have the sign now. I realize people can park during the day on the street. And the other thing that I have a problem with is that the community options home at 111 Brookwood, Mr. Lar can show you these pictures that we took. This is where Cassidy is living. The landlord there has put all of these things along the driveway, on both sides, and all along the property line, because guess what? He didn't want the community options people parking in his yard and muddying it up, and they were getting caught in the dirt. So now they're coming down to Greenbrier, and they're parking down in the grass on Greenbrier at the other community options home, which isn't even owned by the same landlord, and or parking in the grass. Like I said to Mr. Lar, if they need a place to park, why don't they park on Judith? It's closer to Brookwood, and Judith has curbs. At least they wouldn't have to be in people's yards. So, I don't know if anything can be done about this, but, I know you're all sympathetic to this, but it's still, you're all like, glad it's not me.
Well,
Who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't be?
I don't think that's entirely.
And, the other thing is, and I hate to even pull this card, but, a lot of people say, well, would this happen in a $500,000 neighborhood? Probably not. But here we are in a $250,000 neighborhood, and yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But, Mr. Berquist, just for clarity, the fact of the matter is these types of questions with regard to housing are all controlled by the Federal Fair Housing Act. And the Federal Fair Housing Act is very clear that people in protected classes, including people with disabilities, are to be treated the same as any other resident in the township. We had previously looked at whether or not there was this opportunity to create buffer zones between homes. When we looked at it before, we could not find a defensible ordinance that would allow that. I've asked Mr. Smith to once again look at this question, but I'm going to be surprised that in fact you find that. In fact, if you look at the literature with regard to the Fair Housing Act and people with disabilities, what the Fair Housing Act regulations tell you is that not only can you not treat those homes differently, that if in fact reasonable accommodations need to be made inside your zoning ordinance, you're required to make those reasonable accommodations as well. So it's a very difficult thing in terms of regulating homes for this use.
What about the parking issues?
Well,
Like, are people allowed to park in somebody else's front yard, even with their permission?
Well, in Peters Township right now, it is not a violation to park a car on the yard. You have, when there are violations of parking in the evening, or if there are any other violations of township ordinances, those can be enforced. So if people see people parking overnight, they should call the police, and those cars will be ticketed. I mean, one option, if you want, is to enact an ordinance that prohibits any parking on Greenbrier Drive. That would be another possibility. You could do that.
I was just going to suggest that. I think that would be an option to not allow any street parking because of the narrowness of the.
And that's a possibility. You can do that.
Let's look into that.
I say that we need to treat these people like anybody else in the township, so I suggest we do that. I mean, we're giving them extra rope here.
Oh, I'm going to disagree with you, Mr. Ball. To the extent that there have been known violations of our ordinances, we have pursued those. We have pursued
To
those.
the extent that our police department seems to be out there an inordinate number of times, I would say that there's something inordinate here.
But I will tell you this, every call that goes to a community options home, that call ends up on my desk. In the last several months, there have been one, and it's not at these locations. It's at a different location in town. The problems that were there when these, particularly on Greenbrier, when that home went in, to some extent, we don't see those. We don't have the police department and the ambulance service there like we did when that home first went in.
And that was a residence issue.
Yes.
Right. Can I ask a question related to the fact that that's a business in a rental home? And any other home occupancy is restricted as far as vehicles parking. Is there any opportunity to try to utilize that aspect of it?
I don't believe so, because you have people with disabilities who need supervision, and I can't imagine that it's not a reasonable accommodation to have cars when those caregivers come.
Legitimately for the people who are working in that site. But if in fact what's happening is that people from another location are parking there and then walking, wouldn't that be a little bit out of the...
I don't think there's anything that stops you from having people parking in your driveway, whether they're visiting you or someone else on the street. And so I don't know how you would do that.
But for a whole day, for an 8-hour or 10-hour period, when a business is being conducted, I guess I'm just asking about that.
I think the thing that you can do is no parking on the street and apply it to the entire street. I think you can do that.
Yeah, let's search on that first.
Yeah, the problem is if you do that, then what happens if they come back and say, well, for the reasons that you already stated, these people need all kinds of services, and you have to make a reasonable accommodation to us. And
Well, then let the landlord make the accommodation,
would be to,
Expand their driveway.
Right.
Would be to let parking on the street 24/7.
And I think you face that when that question comes in. So
Could I ask one other question? Maybe Mr. Smith could also investigate. I appreciate that we don't have as much option as we would like. But is there any history or any potential, for example, if in fact there end up to be 3 homes on Greenbrier, what negative impact does that have on property value when someone then tries to sell and it becomes known that this situation exists? What recourse would people have?
Well, that's one of the questions Mr. Lau really asked you to look at. Is there a point, because unfortunately or fortunately, depending on where you line up here, there's a whole body of law on this that has been really hard on municipalities in saying you have to allow this. However, what the new question was, I don't know that we looked at it last time, which I guess was a few years back, I don't remember, as to whether we get this saturation issue. What if we have 4 or 5 on a street? Can we regulate homes, saying you're allowed to have 1 home on a street or 1 home within a certain radius or 2 homes? Can we look and see if the courts have addressed that? Because we recognize the plight. So that's what Mr. Lauer's charged me with, recognizing what we found out last time. On the parking, I made notes on, I made some other notes of what you've raised. We've not looked at that, but if there's any way in, I'll perhaps provide a memo to the board and say, look, this is where the law is. I think it was, the last time it wasn't as though we did get threatened to be sued. We weren't concerned about that in so much as the case law they were citing was concerning.
And I think
There are laws that regulate group homes.
Yeah,
And there are, I know there are because I've dealt with that. And they say that you can only have so many people in a given facility and so forth. And then, can't a principle like that be applied to groups of group homes?
Right, that would be, I agree, that would be the logical concept. Whether the federal courts have dealt with it yet, I just haven't looked.
Well, I think you need to look at it in the zoning context, because I know there has to be case law that says, you have to permit each type of use within your municipality, but you can restrict how intensive that use is. I mean, you would,
I think
it may be, sort of stretching the argument a little bit. But
and I hear you. I think the concern that we've had, or at least looking at this, is that in the zoning context, these are considered residential homes. And so they don't really recharacterize, even though they're group homes, they fall into that category. Right. But you make a good point. These are things we're going to look at to see if we can find them, because Mr. Lauer did have a concern. What happens if 5 or 6 homes go on one street and you get the brunt of really group, not so much group, but a more commercial enterprise on your street, although the courts have tailored these or considered these residential. Right. So that's
Here's the other thing. May I
Excuse me,
speak?
if you want to talk, you've got to come up.
I know in having conversations with some of the community options people, back when all of this was going on, Marie McCullen, and she is no longer with them, she told me at that time that every place where community options has a group home does not have adequate parking. That's another flaw in all of this stuff as far as accommodating people. They are operating a business and they're putting in a location where there's not adequate parking. The other thing that really troubles me is, again, you have a whole group of workers coming down into our neighborhood. We all know what happened in Baldwin with the community options home, where the one employee shot the other employee. And people thought that there were drug deals going on at that home. So now here we're going to have all this concentrated on our very small street. And I just don't get it. I just can't understand it.
I agree.
Well, and the other thing we need to look at is if we want to restrict parking on Greenbrier based on its width, are we going to be able to do that and not restrict parking on similarly wide streets in the township, or are we going to open ourselves up to a discrimination argument?
Right.
It all needs looked at.
Yeah.
You're right.
And how many people typically live in one of these houses?
We don't know. We don't know for sure. I think at least 2 are at the one at 106 Greenbrier.
As
I'd be
we-
willing to bet that it's 2 or less, because if it's more than 2, it is classified as a group home.
It's
You
not.
can check that definition.
Only one.
If you want to speak, you've got to come up.
Go on up, Janet, go on.
But it is 1 or 2 in these homes.
Yeah, because
We don't have much decorum here, but that's what
they keep it to that for a particular reason. So what they're doing is they're skirting the definition of group home by keeping 2 people there.
Got it.
And but what they're doing is when you cluster those homes together, then you're creating a pseudo group home. And what they do by that is then you can, in their view, optimize the use of your help.
Right.
And one person can cover more than one home, which is just, to me, subverting the regulation. So we really do need to take a look at what they're actually doing, because if you extend that just a little bit, what would be to prevent somebody from buying or obtaining or building, whatever they want to do, half a dozen of these places in a given area? And then you have a colony of places.
They're almost to that point now.
Well, they're getting close to it.
Yeah,
And then you have essentially a real group facility, and
I think you raise a good point, Mr. Baldwin.
Except the tricky thing here is if what we hear is true, and then the third group home would be a different owner, in a different company,
No, it
does
would be the same owner.
Oh, it would be the same owner. Okay, I thought you said it'd be.
He owns 3.
Well, I understand it's the same landowner, but it'd be a different company renting from him.
Yeah.
So do they?
You can't even if you had an apartment building. This is by HUD regulations, and you had people with disabilities in 3 contiguous units. You can't do that.
Right.
So, and they're separate people. So, I don't think if they were separate owners, I don't think it would count. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to look at. They're all legal issues, and I'm not the lawyer. So.
We're not going to solve it.
May I say one more thing, Mr. Lauer? You talked about.
Please come
I know
on.
that you get. I know that you get police reports when there's anything going on at one of the community options homes. And as you told me the other day, the only one there's been a problem with has been Elm Grove.
That's the only
And
one
I
in
know
the
why.
last couple
Can I
months.
guess why? Parking, right?
No.
No? I'm shocked because
No.
that
It is
parking
not.
situation up there is really bad.
It's had nothing to do with parking.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, that's good to know.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak on a non-agenda item?
On the same topic. I'm Dan Dang at 101 Greenbrier. I'm aware of the Fair Housing Act, and I'm not trying to stop anyone from moving into Peters Township. So, as you've heard, 3 out of the 12 homes are residential rental properties on our street. And 2 of the 3 are institutional homes. 1 is rented by an individual. Rental properties, generally not counting group homes, are rented by transit people who are here for short terms and move on. And some of the problems that we've had on our street was there's no pride in ownership whatsoever taking care of these places. Litter, speeding cars when they're late for their shift. And it's not, they don't drive that far to get to the house, but they got to get there fast. So, parking issues, people yelling, arguments. There was a domestic, loud music from their cars when they're coming in and out, all times of day, even at midnight when they change shifts. Cigarette butts flicked out the window, get to their last puff in before they get to work. So, now these landlords, they don't generally live in Peters Township. They found a cash cow in these institutional companies. They're willing to pay a higher rent because they're subsidized by federal government funds. So, but on that, if the police chief would run a report on how many times the police, fire, and EMTs have been called to 109 Greenbrier, which is not a group home. It's not a group home, okay? And compare it to the number of times they went to 106 Greenbrier, which is a group home, I think they'll find it's pretty even. Because the police have been to the resident's house who rents the one house many, many times. And the police also have been to the group homes many, many times. So, I think that they'll, even if they checked even further, they might see a pattern in Peters Township on rental properties and transients that the police are there at these kind of properties more often than any other property. Since we don't want to discriminate against anyone because of the Fair Housing Act, this may sound a little off the wall, but maybe we should create a special tax on residential rental properties in the township. This will offset the cost of specialized training and equipment for the police force and the EMTs, even the hiring of a person to inspect some of these rentals that they're up to code, and these institutions are up to code, because because the cat's out of the bag, and with all these the older communities in Peters, a lot of these homes are being up for sale right now, if you haven't noticed, and so some of the local realtors have realized this, and they're actively pursuing, institutional homes or anything like that to rent these properties too, because there's a higher commission in for them because of the high rents. So, in closing, I'd like to say that group homes were created to blend in with the neighbors in the neighborhood, so that the residents could feel part of the community. Okay. Now, by putting them in one cluster, within 300 yards of each other, you're defeating the purpose, because then they're not really becoming part of the community, becoming part of each other like they were in an institution. And all you're really doing is creating a housing project, is what you're doing. So.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on a non-agenda item? All right. Being that there's none, we'll move on with the agenda. And the next item is unfinished business, which there is none. So we're on to new business. And the first item is resolution authorizing the chairman of council to sign an application for a highway occupancy permit related to construction of Rolling Hills Drive, which is obviously at the new Rolling Hills Park at Peters Township School.
So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because this is going to be a major topic of our first budget hearing because it has real impacts on the upcoming budget as well as future budgets. But we have settled on a design for the intersection, and that design is depicted in this drawing here. Because it involves the intersection of with a state road, it requires that we obtain a highway occupancy permit from PennDOT. So what the intention is right now East McMurray Road is in this alignment. And what this does is pull East McMurray Road off alignment to create a plus intersection here, and then brings it back onto the current alignment. In doing so, it mitigates the problem that we anticipated for these homes in this location who would not be able to make left-hand turns into their property or out of their property without this creation of this cul-de-sac. So where we are in the process right now, in fact, Mark and I, tonight we're meeting with two groups of individuals along this roadway. We have another meeting tomorrow night with 10 property owners in this vicinity. It requires that they also file highway occupancy permits to allow their driveways to be reconnected to East McMurray Road. So we're in the process of obtaining those permissions as well. So what we need from council tonight is PennDOT has agreed with our assumptions for this design. They're now prepared to review this design to find out whether or not it meets all the warrants for an intersection design. They're going to begin that process once they have in hand a signature from Mr. Berquist indicating that the township's asking for that review to be done.
Okay. Assuming we need a motion.
I make a motion to approve resolution 090120.
Second.
Any further discussion?
If I may.
Certainly.
The properties that are beyond the circle of the cul-de-sacs,
Yes.
how do they get to the road?
And again, we're going to look at this a lot closer, but if you look, you can see there are driveway extensions. So for the people on the very end here, the only change is actually an elevation change. It's the width of the paving overlay. For individuals in here, there are actually driveway extensions. This person actually connects back to the cul-de-sac on the back end. Here, these are just adjustments for height. Here you have driveway extensions.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, even though the people connect to East McMurray now, those outliers have to have a new highway occupancy permit?
They do, because PennDOT requires any time there is any change affecting a property owner, no matter how minor that change may be, that a new highway occupancy permit be filed. So like I say, when you get to these people way out here, that driveway comes in exactly at the same angle in the same location. The only difference is that there may be a slight adjustment in the depth of the asphalt that gets them out onto the road, and that requires a highway occupancy permit to be filed.
And one last confirmation. You're saying that PennDOT has approved this design? So they're
No, what I'm saying is we have worked with, they've agreed to the underlying assumptions upon which the design is based. So they have accepted our traffic study at this point. And now the question is, do these physical alignments, these curvatures, and how this is designed in terms of these stacking lanes, those meet PennDOT design criteria? And based upon the signature of this application, they will begin that review. We fully expect that they will, because we have been in contact with PennDOT from day one with regard to what our intention is here. One of the things that we did that I think is going to help facilitate the approval process is The district engineer, Joe Chajor, was willing to gather everyone who needs to review this into a room and turned to them and said, I don't see any reason why we can't get this approved. And so based upon that, I think the approval process is going to take time, but I think it's going to be quicker than what we would have been otherwise.
Well, hopefully you're right.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. 7-0. Next item, authorize the appropriate township official to execute an easement and right-of-way agreement with the Peters Township Sanitary Authority.
You know what, I did not do a drawing of this, but there's a drawing in your docket. The work is beginning on the relocation of the interceptor along Oakwood Road. One of the things is that given the situation along that roadway, it is in the best interest of the homeowners to relocate where the interceptor is located. So, and to be able to make that happen, the interceptor currently passes through a piece of property that the township owns. We need to allow the sanitary authority to relocate where that passes through our property. As a practical matter, it has no impact whatsoever. This is not a piece of property that the township would ever develop for any use. It sits there simply as open space. So it's my recommendation that the township authorize the appropriate officials to execute the easement and right-of-way agreement with the Peters Township Sanitary.
I'll make that motion that we authorize the appropriate township official to execute the easement and right-of-way agreement with the Peters Township Sanitary Authority as set forth in the docket.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Any further conversation? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That is also 7-0. Next item is to accept the resignation of Michael P. Kroll from the Peters Township Sanitary Authority.
I'll make a motion that we accept Mr. Kroll's resignation with regrets.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. 7-0, and he will be certainly missed. That goes on to payroll and bills.
Mr. Chairman, I've reviewed the payroll and bills. I find them to be in order. I make a motion that we approve the same.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. 7-0. Anyone have any questions on the payroll and bills? All right. Correspondence, anything under correspondence you want to bring to our attention?
No.
Okay. Next, minutes of the various committees. Anyone have any issues, comments on any of those? All right, we're on to miscellaneous. Anyone have any miscellaneous items tonight?
I do.
There we go.
I just want to make sure, last meeting provided council this tentative budget calendar. I just want to verify the fact these dates work for council.
I'm fine. It's every Monday.
I have a serious problem with the September 17th.
Me too.
That makes three.
That's the Paul Simon concert, and I'm not missing the concert.
Well, and I can tell you, if you have to miss a meeting, that's not the one. We need to make sure we can get everybody there.
Well, I think that let's reschedule that one.
So while we spoke to HRG, and they are available on Tuesday and Thursday of that week, if that's any better for people.
Yeah, that works for
I'm not
me.
available that week at all.
Neither am I.
Oops. All right.
So where are we date-wise?
We're at the 17th of September.
Which is Monday, next Monday.
That's next Monday. And we have several council members who will not be there. I believe it's
No, I'll come myself.
That'd be a long meeting, but that'd be brutal.
Would all council be available for that meeting on October 1st?
I will.
Is that a Monday night?
It's a Monday.
Yes.
I don't see any reason why I wouldn't be.
I'm not available October 1st. I am in England, actually.
Or
To
is
visit.
is everybody available on October 15th?
October what?
15th.
October 15th? Yes, I
Yes.
am.
Yes.
It works for me.
Okay, so what I'm going to suggest is we're going to move that meeting about Rolling Hills Park to the 15th, as long as I can get all the players here on that date. Because I do believe of all the things facing council, that's the most important.
Okay.
And if need be, let us come up with a way to handle these meetings with the department heads on another date.
Well, it just seems like we always get stuck on Mondays, which is great, but,
Well,
if we're
and-
just restricting ourselves to Mondays, then it becomes limited because it only happens once.
And I have no problem meeting any other day. You tell me what day that is, though. That's-
A lot of people have other things scheduled on other days.
Yeah,
Mondays
We
are-
reserve Mondays.
Yeah, that's what I always count on, is that everybody kind of knows council's meeting on Mondays, particularly in the fall.
So, right now, the meeting on Monday the 17th is not to be.
I'm taking that we're not
Right.
meeting on the 17th. And then on the 15th, we'll have that meeting. Let me work out how we're going to handle these meeting with the department heads. It may be that maybe what makes sense is on the 1st, give me a chance to look at where the most significant items are coming from, and we can have that department head meeting there.
Sure.
Do you anticipate asking for October 27th? Because that was not on your list. If you take one off in the front, are you moving them all back?
October
29th.
27th is a Saturday.
Sorry,
29th.
Well,
that
the
was a
19th
Monday.
is open.
29th, I apologize. You're right.
November 19th is open, so whatever we needed to roll in, we could just roll to that day.
Or
Well, how
October
about,
29th.
how about if we all send Mr. Lauer
Every
our
Monday that you're
available
available.
Mondays or non-available Mondays from,
Well, you're the problem child.
what, I'm the
You're
same
going
one
to a
as,
concert, and then you're going to London or whatever.
He's not taking us, that's good. But the 29th may well be the solution.
yeah, but if we could just all,
Yes,
if our
that'd be
dates are
great.
what, October, that we cannot make it.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Halloween's
You don't have a problem with that? Seeing there's none. Anything else under miscellaneous? Anybody?
Staff turn.
Going
staff,
once.
Full-time staff turnover, do you want to say?
Going twice?
Nope.
No more miscellaneous? Anyone next agenda? Any items for next agenda?
Last meeting, I asked about the audited financials for the
And I still,
DFW ambulance service.
I have reached out to the ambulance service, and I still do not have those.
Well, you
But
tell them that I'm not going to
let's have them- let's have them
give
here.
them any more money until we see those.
Let's
until
have
we
them
see
back
those.
in here.
Okay. Let me explain
It's
it.
ridiculous. It's like the second or third year we've asked for it, and we still haven't gotten them.
I agree. Anything else? This meeting is adjourned.
And there's an executive session.